What's going on, fellow classmates? 6:24 at night. It's the 26th of September 2023. The diary of the griever named John Weaver, which would be me from Roseman, California. What's going on, guys? And anybody else is watching. And hopefully Miss Heinzman too. I just did my comments in there, and I had a few brief concerns. One of the topics, yes, I did explain something that hopefully be a little bit of a hook. But my age these days, 57 years old, which means I have seen a lot, including a little bit of experience in someone's, well, actually, maybe in a couple of people's essays regarding arcades of sorts. But which arcades and which format are we talking about? Okay, Sherman set the Wayback Machine for 1980s. And don't be too gentle on the machine this time for the Wayback Machine. Mr. Peabody won't be happy about it. Pong came out in the late 70s, a computer game for the masses, and they had these things out in kiosks all over they could find in marketing. The company was Atari. They had a very unusual logo, and I love this thing. I really do. Too bad I had to copyright it. I'd steal it from them. But they made a game similar to table tennis. Electronic version of table tennis, actually. And it captured a lot of people's attention. They had systems sold, but also they were demonstrating just how popular arcade games would be. Give it about another year or two, or maybe more than that, you go into pizza parlors or into other places, and you would see from different companies coming out doing the same thing. The technology they were using graphics called rasters and Ventrix, I think. Rasters were little tiny dots moving around across the screen, left and right. Vector lines, those are the ones I was looking for, that they would make into long lines, shapes out of them, and they would be capturing people's attention. The graphics, the sound effects, the music. If you happen to go on YouTube and do a search in there, you would find many games that came out in the 80s and 90s. These days are a lot more sophisticated and using technology from back in the 80s and 90s, they're still enjoyable, even to this day. When they did come out, these games were either a lifesaver or terribly, terribly addicting, where you really lose control sometimes. I would suggest to students trying to research this particular topic to do a little deep diving, not just on the graphics or the corporations or the list of games. Controversies. When the games were coming out, and they were very popular in amusement parks, amusement centers, miniature golf places, pizza parlors, and that sort of thing, there were rumors going around that the video games were forcing kids to be violent. When they came out with the at home, and they actually changed cartridges around and they changed them to the CDs that we know of today, games got more and more bloodier and more violent during those days. To the point where they actually had congressional hearings. They were wondering and they were demanding from the video game administration, and this was happening about, I think, back in the late 80s through the 90s. They were talking about, the Congress was talking about this. There was House committees on this. There were committee meetings. They're wondering why the video game industry allowed things to be so bloody and so graphic, and why are they causing our kids to go nuts doing more violent crimes. They wanted to find out, was there a correlation between the gaming and the violence from the kids? Now, if Ms. Heinzman can follow this a little bit here, the reason why it was considered moral to amoral, I would consider it almost immoral even to this time. There was no regulations when it came out. It was a free-for-all, a major free-for-all. Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, especially Mortal Kombat. One of the more bloodier stand-up games you can actually have, except if you want to deal with things getting blasted like crazy, but not when you're talking about decapitation, ripping up guts, body parts, ripping off a person's skull with the spine attached. Yeah. The gaming industry, I think in the 90s, always to 2000, somewhere in there, they had decided to make these games, well, Congress was still debating an issue, but the gaming industry themselves decided to police themselves. There had to be certain age groups for a certain type of games that they were producing out there and for people to play. They didn't want the controversy happening to them, and they didn't want it to affect their pocketbook. They were making money. Grand Theft Auto was one of those kind of games out there, still lives today, in many forms and variations of it. Call of Duty, SOCOM, some of the games I'm familiar with in the past 20 years or more. I've heard about them, hadn't played them. And no, I hadn't tried Grand Theft Auto, where you can almost get away with anything and everything in that game. Now, I tried what they call the first-person shooters. Your point of view down the barrel of a gun. And there are certain games I would play and other games I would not play. I know what it is like to what they consider frag a person in a game. But I've never done the multi-platform, multi-person games out there. There's a lot of acronyms I don't know about regarding it. I do know about what it was like as a teenager growing up and how much I had gotten myself in so much trouble in playing these games. Yeah, I played starships against starships. I played against asteroids. I've dodged asteroids, blasted TIE fighters, even shot at monsters with crossbows and shotguns and machine guns. I played against computer programs and disc games. Tron. Some of the music I noticed that they were using, mostly their own computer variations. But sometimes one or two of the games would play classical music, either from Bach or Brahms or from another composer. I also know what kind of trouble a kid can get into if he really gets addicted into the games where the games are more important than life at home, only because the kid couldn't deal with life at home. On my channel, I talk a lot about what I've gone through in my past. You're going to get overloaded if you happen to search through the damn things, because sometimes they're buried in what we call the WIN files. A lot of personal family history in there. And if I've got something or a major beef against something or someone, I usually post it with a title on it. But everything else is buried in the WIN files. They're dated. They're coded. But they're dated. And this one is just basically for the class right now, because there's a lot of stuff I talk. And it's usually on the channels that if you want to be bored to death. But they're also personal about it. which would bring me back to my own topic here, Professor H. I originally said something about alcoholism because I thought it would be, okay for me to do this, and yeah, there's a lot of background on this one. But even though I may have the personal history on this wasn't hitting me as home or personal or very, very hard. And I think it's necessary for me to do the research as much as I can on mental health. I'm a bit familiar with the past of how people were treated. I'm also still learning more about how they were treated in the 20th century. Dark Ages, they just locked your ass up and hope maybe the devil would get out of you. Most of the time, they'd just kill you or just keep you locked up, period. They didn't know what was going on in a human brain until about, what was it, the 1800s, late 1800s. We had Sigmund Freud and the rest of his cohorts coming out there doing a lot of psychological examinations, evaluations, coming up with their theories that the psychologists are trying to upgrade to this day. And it'll tell you about the facts and figures, all that information about mental health, but the personal stories. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen commercials in the 20th century, late 20th century, concerning about mental health. Almost nothing. But I heard too many news stories coming from the media. People committing suicide left and right, mass suicide sometimes, purpose or goaded into it. Suicides of all sorts because what was going on inside of here. Or how many television shows that we've watched and seen. What a crazy goes crazy, and we didn't know how to deal with it, or I hope to hell to understanding what was going on with this poor person. Professor, it's going to be longer than 7 pages at that point, and I know I'm probably going to have to shorten it down, but the reasons why I'm talking about this one because it's more than just an essay. But I'm hoping the students will see this video and understand that it's no joke. And I've seen too many people, too many family and friends. I don't. That's why it's kind of uncomfortable for me talking about these things. Probably I'll talk about it a little bit more freely on my next video, but this is just an introduction to the students regarding the topics, even the one I'm working with. So I will see you in class. But the next video gets heavier.